Coming up, Russian President Vladimir Putin observes an annual exercise called Grom or Thunder, which mobilizes nuclear weapons. This comes as Russia accuses Ukraine of possible dirty bomb attacks. The U.S. said it's not surprised by the exercise as it's been notified by Russia previously. Lawmakers hold a parliamentary audit of the National Intelligence Service. The NIS says there's a possibility of a nuclear test by North Korea before the midterm elections in the U.S. Starting today, those over 18 years old in South Korea can book the Omicron-targeting bivalent COVID-19 vaccines. What are the three options and who needs them? Good morning. Welcome to New Day at Arirang. We begin this morning as the Kremlin says Russian President Vladimir Putin has monitored drills of the country's strategic nuclear forces, which involved an intercontinental ballistic missile. The last nuclear drill took place just days before Russia launched its invasion of Ukraine. Kim Yo-sun has the latest.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has remotely observed exercises by Russia's strategic nuclear forces for the first time since the invasion of Ukraine. The Kremlin says that the exercises are meant to simulate a response to a massive nuclear strike. Russian state television aired a video of Putin observing the drills via a large screen. In the broadcast, Moscow's defense chief explained the drills involved a nuclear submarine, long-range aircraft, as well as multiple practice launches of ballistic and cruise missiles.
Comrade Supreme Commander-in-Chief, in accordance with the training plan for the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation, under your leadership, training is being conducted to oversee the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation, during which the tasks of delivering a massive nuclear strike by strategic offensive forces in response to an enemy nuclear strike will be worked out.
The exercises follow Putin's warning about his readiness to use, quote, all means available to defend against attacks on Russia's territory in a clear reference to the country's nuclear arsenal. They also come as Russian officials have alleged for the past several days that Ukraine is planning to develop and use a so-called dirty bomb in its conflict with Moscow. Dirty bombs are conventional explosives combined with radioactive material designed to spread radioactivity that may lead to death and destruction. Ukraine, as well as the West, strongly deny the allegations, explaining that Russia is trying to make a pretext for a further escalation of the war. The U.S. was told about the drill under the terms of the New START Arms Treaty, under which Moscow must notify Washington of such missile launches. Kim Yo-sun, Arirang News.
The head of South Korea's National Intelligence Service has said that North Korea's 7th nuclear test could take place by November 7th, right before the U.S. midterm elections. Director Kim Kyu-hyun was speaking on Thursday during a government audit of the National Assembly's Intelligence Committee. The agency's view remains unchanged from last month when it said that Pyongyang's first nuclear test since 2017, if it takes place, is likely to happen between October 16th and November 7th. South Korea's military held a large-scale amphibious landing drill with troops from the Marine Corps and Navy taking part. The annual exercise comes at a time when Pyongyang appears to have completed preparations for its 7th nuclear test. Bae-eun-ji takes us closer to the action.
South Korean assault amphibious vehicles fire smoke grenades as they move toward land. The country's Marine Corps said Wednesday that it conducted a landing exercise in the southeastern coastal city of Pohang that included 40 of these amphibious vehicles. Around 6,000 troops from South Korea's Navy and Marine Corps took part in the drill, which also involved 10 ships and about 50 helicopters. The troops practiced a technique called helocast, where Special Forces troops jump directly from a helicopter into the water. Troops also parachuted from a transport aircraft and practiced fast roping out of helicopters, a skill that's needed when helicopter landings are impractical during battle.
Our goal is to be ready to immediately respond to our mission anytime, anywhere, and in any kind of circumstances.
This year's training included other branches of the military, such as the Army Aviation Operations Command, the Air Force Operations Command, and the Cyber Operations Command. The landing drill is held every year, but it's the first time in 4 years that it's been open to the media. The military has in the past refrained from officially commenting on this drill as part of efforts to not provoke North Korea, as the regime has been reacting very sensitively to this kind of exercise. But this year, the military released video footage and a press release after the recent series of provocations from the north. Pyongyang recently launched ballistic missiles, fired artillery shells, and its warplanes flew near the inter-Korean border. The latest exercise is part of South Korean military's annual Hoguk defense drills that kicked off last Monday and run through Friday. Peun, Arirang News.
From today, over 18s in South Korea can book the Omicron-targeting bivalent COVID-19 vaccines. Previously, the shots were only recommended to high-risk groups such as seniors and those in nursing homes. There are 3 options. The currently used Moderna shot targeting the BA.1 variant, one from Pfizer that also targets BA.1, and another Pfizer vaccine aimed at BA.4 and BA.5. Those who've completed their primary vaccine series or caught COVID at least 4 months ago can get the jab. Reservations can be made online, by phone, or visiting a nearby community center. The vaccines will be administered from early next month. The world is now looking back on how it has dealt with COVID-19 as well as ways to effectively deal with the next possible pandemic. Health officials from across the globe gathered in Seoul to discuss these issues. Song Yoo-jin brings the highlights from that session.
For the past 2 years, COVID-19 has completely upended our lives. So far, more than 600 million people have caught the virus and over 6 million have lost their lives. But what helped the world endure and cope with this global health crisis were innovative vaccines and therapeutics. And some 300 heads of state and CEOs of global vaccine and biologics companies gathered in Seoul to share the lessons they learned from the COVID-19 experience and how they would deal with possible future pandemics at the 2022 World Bio Summit. The inaugural 2-day event, which kicked off on Tuesday, is co-hosted by South Korea's Health Ministry and the World Health Organization. This year's keyword is equity.
Was vaccine production was concentrated in just a few locations. And those regions, US, Europe, India, China, had to serve their own populations before they could share the vaccines with the rest of the world. So that was a significant cause of the inequity.
So we need to work to strengthen vaccination programs in countries around the world so that we don't have a situation today where 77% of people in low-income countries haven't had a single dose of vaccine.
And South Korea is expected to play a key role. In February, the country was selected as home to the WHO's new global biomanufacturing training hub that will increase access to vaccines for low and middle-income countries and strengthen their manufacturing capacity. And during the summit, South Korea and the WHO adopted the Seoul Declaration, a set of commitments to prevent, prepare, and respond against future pandemics.
Through a global capacity centered on innovation in the biohealth industry, it aims to promote international cooperation to advance infectious disease countermeasures such as vaccines, therapeutics, and diagnostics to ensure everyone's equitable access to them.
South Korea aims to hold the World Bio Summit every year and make it into an international event where participants can discuss ways to improve public health through vaccines and biologics. And this year, it's all about preparedness based on equity and cooperation. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News.
The newly launched Presidential Commission on Carbon Neutrality and Green Growth held its first plenary meeting. Ahead of that event, President Yoon stressed that going carbon neutral must not be a burden on the country's industries. Han Sung-woo shares with us his remarks.
The Yoon Suk-yeol administration has renamed and newly relaunched South Korea's main advisory body on climate change as the Presidential Commission on Carbon Neutrality and Green Growth. And ahead of its first plenary meeting on Wednesday, President Yoon met with commission members at his office in Seoul, where he said that environmental protection and economic growth should go hand in hand.
탄소 중립이라는 것이 또 우리 산업의 부담으로 작용해서는 안 되기 때문에 이런 친환경 또 신재생 에너지에 관한 이 혁신과 기술 발전이 따라야 되고.
The president also cast doubt on the basis for the previous government's nationally determined contribution goal for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, likely referring to the country's pledge last year to cut them by 40% from 2018 levels by 2030, but acknowledged that as that pledge was made, it must be delivered.
President Yoon has asked the Commission to approach the goal not ideologically but scientifically and come up with a detailed implementation plan.
In the plenary meeting held at the Korea Institute of Science and Technology, the Commission's co-chairman, Prime Minister Han Duck-soo, vowed to protect national interest through a balanced energy policy, including through nuclear energy, a shift from the Moon Jae-in administration's approach.
We will achieve both energy security and carbon neutrality through the active use of nuclear power plants and by blending in renewable energy.
Stressing that the private sector must be at the forefront of the push to go carbon neutral, Han added that the government will back corporate efforts by providing support regarding finance, tax, R&D, and regulations. Based on the results of Wednesday's meeting, the Yoon administration plans to set a roadmap for cutting greenhouse gas emissions and establishing a national framework for carbon-neutral green growth. 한성우, Arirang News.
U.S. mortgage interest rates hit their highest level in more than 2 decades on the back of efforts by the Federal Reserve to combat inflation. Data from the Mortgage Bankers Association on Wednesday showed that the average contract rate on a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage rose 22 basis points to 7.16% for the week ending October 21st. That's the highest figure since 2001. Mortgage rates have more than doubled since the beginning of this year, following consecutive rate hikes by the Fed. This afternoon, President Yoon Suk-yeol will preside over the 11th Emergency Economy meeting since he took office. And that meeting will be broadcast live to the whole nation for the first time. The presidential office has previously said that the meeting will focus on future economic opportunities for the nation. To discuss some key points that are likely to be discussed, we have Professor Oh Jun-seok, Dean of Sungmyung Business School, with us this morning. Good morning, Professor.
Morning.
Not only is the South Korean won losing power over the U.S. dollar, but the Japanese yen is also at its lowest against the greenback for 14 years. What does this mean for Asia's financial situation? Is this something South Korea has to react to as well?
It will be the beginning of the tough season. The Fed determined to tame inflation even at the cost of economic growth. It is expected the hike in 75 basis points in November, another hike of 50 basis points in December. As the U.S. Fed has been pursuing hawkish monetary policy, U.S. dollar has been beating down most Asian currencies. Korean won has no exception. Korea has no other choice but to follow the path of interest rate hike of the U.S. Fed, only tuning the timing matters for the Bank of Korea. The Japanese yen, as you mentioned, has weakened to the lowest level against the U.S. dollar in more than 32 years, raising the question of whether it will rattle regional neighbors, including Korea and China. Concerns over the plunging yen have been mounting as it slipped to 150 yen per dollar, the lowest level since August 1990. A psychological bottom line for international investors. Fragile yen may spur negative investors sentiment toward Asia because Japan still counts significantly when it comes to Asian economy. Last month, foreign investors withdrew a net over $1.8 billion US dollars from Korean stock market. IMF has warned the worst case is not yet to come for the global economy. U.S. has been strained by the rapid rise in interest rate hike. The China real estate market slump and the Europe by the energy crisis. These three largest economic zones have rattled the emerging market and global economy around the world.
Right, and one of the biggest issues in the economy right now is Gangwon-do Province's decision to default on money owed from the construction of Legoland, a theme park that just opened this year. Why was this big news, and how has it impacted the national government?
It is another top matter to tackle with, as uncertainties stemming from a default in project financing for the construction of Legoland in Gangwon Province. Theme park business has not been attractive in time of economic slump, as in the case of Six Flags in the United States. Experts said it will inject $1.1 billion into the debt market while ensuring additional liquidity to cover short-term loans. A default by a public developer behind Legoland Korea worth $142 billion worth in the debt market. In the financial area, so-called TRIs, Treasury bill, Treasury note, and Treasury bond are classified as risk-free assets, zero risk of default. State or local government debt might be considered risk-free equivalent instrument. Now that the confidence process has flopped, it might be harder to extend the maturity of the bond. It might be much harder to get a bridge loan for a matching duration of bond financing. Smaller companies are in grave hardship. They must prevent a chain bankruptcy of companies due to short-term liquidity, inability, and inaccessibility to the short-term financial market. In this sense, the government and central bank have been jointly acting to bolster liquidity. It is, however, told that the Legoland trigger liquidity crunch could be just the beginning. Time will come. Investors should be liable for their losses.
Right, a lot of losses there. Now, let's talk about other issues. As the president leads the emergency economy meeting today, and everyone that is interested can watch, what are items that are likely to be discussed that we haven't touched upon?
Top officials in charge of economic and financial policy will hold an emergency meeting to discuss response to this growing uncertainty and volatility sprouted from the Legoland cases. The emergency meeting comes amid growing volatility in the money market following a default in project financing for the construction of Legoland, as capital hoarding is expected in the financial sectors in response to a growing concern over possible credit crunches and market instabilities. What is needed at the moment is to let the market believe in the normal and regular operation of credit and loan cycle in an economy. In this sense, Financial Authority announced a plan to tap into the bond market stabilization fund to provide liquidity, which should have been earlier, I suppose, as a precedent measures to tackle with the risks in the market. At the upcoming meeting, ministers of economy-related ministries will gather to discuss their response to provide the liquidity, analyze economic risk factors, and ways to secure new growth and export engines.
That's right. Well, thank you so much for your insight. Arirang will be providing a simultaneous interpretation of the meeting. So for those who are interested, can always tune in. Thank you again. Have a great day.
Thank you for having me.
For a look at the news from around the world, we now turn to our Matthew Ashley standing by at the Arirang newsroom. Good morning.
Good morning, Doyon.
Let's start in Iran, where protesters have clashed with security forces amid ongoing protests in the country.
Well, that is right, Doyon. The clashes on Wednesday local time came as protesters marked 40 days since Mahsa Amini's death. Now, 40 days normally symbolizes the end of the traditional mourning period in Iran. Now, thousands of protesters gathered to visit Amini's grave in her hometown Sakez in Kurdistan province. Witnesses and human rights groups say that armed security forces fired live rounds and used tear gas to disperse crowds near the provincial government office. They also reportedly arrested dozens of people. Now, protests began after the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini on September 16th. This is after she was detained by Iran's morality police for not wearing a hijab correctly. Now, staying in Iran, a man walking from Spain to Qatar to attend the Football World Cup in November has gone missing. The last known contact from 41-year-old Spaniard Santiago Sanchez was on October 1st. He had sent friends a picture of himself at the Iraq-Iran border before entering Iran. Now, the disappearance of the experienced trekker and former paratrooper comes at a time of nationwide civil unrest. Spanish media speculate that Sanchez has been detained by Iranian police, a claim that's been backed up by local human rights groups. Now, they claim he was arrested after visiting the grave of Mahsa Amini. Meanwhile, Spain's embassy in Iran has said it is working to locate him. Sanchez started his journey from Madrid in January, walking across 15 countries before contact was lost. Now, China has started testing what appears to be a world-first vaccine delivery system in Shanghai. On Wednesday, local time, the city began a trial of inhalable COVID-19 vaccines. The inhalable could help convince people afraid of needles to get vaccinated and make vaccines more accessible in places with less developed medical infrastructure. Now, while the effectiveness of such needle-free vaccines is still not fully researched, Chinese officials did clear the trial after an immune response was observed in testing. The inhalable inoculation is currently being given as a booster shot to adults in a bid by the country to increase vaccination levels before easing pandemic restrictions. And in our final story, French artist Puyo Soulage, known for his use of the color black, has died, aged 102. Soulage died on Wednesday in the French port city of Sète. Born in the southern city of Rodez in 1919, the abstract painter was fascinated by cave paintings in France and Spain from an early age. Soulage first caught the attention of the art world in the late 1940s for his pieces using bold calligraphy. He is also best known for his abstract work and his exploration of the color black in a series called Outre Noir, or Beyond Black.
Good morning. We'll have more great autumn weather as long as we are aware of wide gaps in readings, which could be more than 10 degrees Celsius again. Temperatures will be hovering above the season norms. Mostly sunny skies with good air quality will be welcomed. Meanwhile, the East Coast will see rain due to easterly winds and expect to see on and off rain of up to 40 millimeters if you're on the east of Gangwon-do province into Saturday afternoon. Lots of clouds to start the day in the south will clear, and afternoon highs will be a couple of degrees higher than yesterday. Seoul and Chuncheon topping out at 19 degrees Celsius, while hovering above 20 degrees Celsius in southern parts of the country, as Busan and Gyeongju will be topping out at 23. Now, autumn leaves on the East Coast may be affected by that rain. And as we are getting deeper into autumn, the nation is going into peak autumn colors, and weather will be cooperative to enjoy the earthy tone colors. With that, here's a look at the weather conditions around the globe.
And that wraps up today's New Day, and Arirang will be back tomorrow for our Friday's edition at the same time. Please stay with Arirang News, though, for more updates throughout the day. Have a lovely day or evening wherever you are, and take care.
K-pop? K-movie? K-food?